If you want to restore communication with your adult child, but you also want to set it up for success, today's episode is for you. I'm joined today by communication expert Michelle Pexa as we discuss how to establish a plan for healthy communication with your estranged child. We're talking today about communication skills that are helpful for encouraging our adult children to open up so that we can have healthy communication and better relationships with them. We'll explain how to reset the foundation for communication when previous conversational breakdowns have strained your relationship, when you keep finding yourself in a cycle of communication blowups, and when your child is distant and isn't communicating much at all. And you'll learn about one possible way to reopen the door to communication, even when you aren't currently communicating with your estranged child. So if you're ready to learn about building a communication plan for reconnecting with your child, grab your notebook and a pen, add some ice to your tea, and listen in. Hi friends, welcome to the Praying Moms of Estranged Children podcast. Are you struggling with strained relationships and losses that have shaken your faith and left you wondering where God is? If you long for peace, a deeper prayer life, and faith that holds steady, you're in the right place. I'm Sarah, a wife, mom of adult kids, and your Jesus-loving friend. Here you'll find encouragement to help you trust God and practical tools to pray with confidence as you walk closely with Him. So turn off your alarm clock, pour a strong latte, and find peace as you trust God with your children and your broken relationships. If you're the mom of an estranged or prodigal adult child, I know you're constantly wrestling with how to trust God with the uncertainty that comes with that relationship. The grief, guilt, and shame that weigh your heart down keep you emotionally stuck in what feels like a never-ending cycle. Maybe you're wondering how things ever ended up like this. Maybe you carry a lot of guilt, grief, and unanswered questions. You might feel like having peace isn't possible, but I'm here to tell you that's a myth. It's just that no one has ever shown you how to find that kind of peace in the middle of this kind of pain. Imagine having freedom from worry, deeper trust in God and His timing, and not feeling discouraged by prayers that haven't been answered yet. That kind of peace really is possible when you learn how to cope with the heartbreak of having an estranged or prodigal adult child. And I know that you can find peace even before reconciliation happens. I know that because I've been where you are. I too was estranged from my child, and Jesus helped me find peace during that dark time. Although the journey of reconciliation hasn't been easy, the Lord brought me through to the other side, and I was able to reconnect with my child. I've experienced firsthand that God was able to steady my heart and give me peace. I understand what you're going through. If you're tired of feeling emotionally exhausted from the ups and downs of your relationship with your child, let me tell you this: you've cried long enough. I can help you through this. We're going to build a plan together so you can begin experiencing peace in your parenting journey. Today is the day to begin healing. Schedule a peaceful parenting call with me right now by going to bit.ly/faith and peace. That's bit.ly/faith and peace. I can't wait to talk with you. One of your greatest desires as a mom of an estranged adult child is to reconnect with him or her. But I know you want that reconciliation to last. You want it to be good. You want to have a great renewed relationship with them that is emotionally healthy and safe for both of you. Communication breakdowns are often the reason why estrangements begin in the first place, and they can also hamper our reconnection efforts as well. I was joined by Michelle Pexa, host of the Peacemaking on Purpose podcast and a mediator for episodes 37 and 38. If you haven't heard those yet, I encourage you to go back and listen to them. We had a great conversation about communication strategies and how you can stay calm and respond with peace when conversations trigger you. Today's episode is the culmination of Michelle's and my conversation. We're going to dive in by talking about what to do when we find ourselves in the middle of a communication blow-up and steps you can take to make the next conversation better. And then later in the episode, we'll dive into how you can build a communication plan even if you are estranged from your child and have very little to no communication with them whatsoever. So let's dive in. Michelle, why does it seem sometimes like we're having a good conversation with our child, or maybe what we would consider to be an okay conversation, something that's going okay, and then it falls apart all of the sudden?
Sometimes what happens is we're trying to be so natural, in our relationship, just let things go as they go.
Mm.
And we don't really have a good plan for how we're going to talk with each other. And every time you get together, something blows up, because there's these triggers. You're pushing their buttons, they're pushing your buttons. Sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally, sometimes you're aware, sometimes you're not, right? That's going on.
Yeah, what can we do when that happens, when we find ourselves in that difficult moment?
What might be helpful, instead of talking about the issues you guys usually talk about and get into, you might want to see, depending on your relationship where you're at, is to see if you could have the opportunity to sit down and talk about a plan about how we could talk with one another. Like you might want to sit down and say, what I noticed is you and I, we get into it. It seems like I'm pushing your buttons. I feel like sometimes my buttons get pushed too, and we're just not hearing each other. And I do want to hear you, and I want to get to know you as a young adult. And I would like all this craziness to stop if we could. And then maybe saying, could we talk about what would work better for both of us? Like, could you tell me what would make it easier for you to have a conversation with me? Right.
Right.
And you actually sit down over a Coke or something and talk about how you're going to talk about things together. Okay. And instead of getting into the weeds right away, you actually have a plan. You might even have some cues, like if you get triggered, certain things I might do because I know I probably might resort back to that, and you might as well.
I love this idea about being so intentional by having a conversation about how to communicate better. I think a lot of times we avoid that hard conversation because it feels awkward or uncomfortable, or we just wish the next conversation would go better. But it often doesn't unless we intentionally plan or shift our behaviors to give that next conversation a good chance of going better. And you're saying we actually need to make a plan for that to happen.
We're trying to break a bad habit. We're trying to break some cycles here. So let's set a cue word. Like one couple I was talking to this weekend, they were saying their cue word as husband and wife is tsunami. Means it's going to happen, right? But you have to respect that cue word. You don't keep talking. That cue word means we need a break. We need to go and breathe or whatever. But setting up a plan, like, I'm going to do my best to let you say what you have to say without judgment, without opinion. Could I take notes so I can track with you? Because my memory sometimes isn't good. I can rip it all up afterwards. I'm not holding it against you, but I just want to really pay attention to what you're saying. And I want to get to know you, right? I really do. I'm working really hard at this. Could we do something like that, right? However it would be, but finding out from them what would make it safe, what would make it more respectful, what would make it so that you could actually have a conversation, especially if you find yourself getting into conflict over little things, which is normally the case. Hey.
Right. Or repeated arguments about the same topics or falling into the same behavior habits. I think the idea of having a keyword, like you mentioned, and conveying your interest in listening well is really helpful, because one of the things that's so challenging about difficult conversations is that when we don't have a plan from the start, things can unravel quickly and can do a lot of damage to the relationship. And when it comes to communicating with someone so important to us as our children, we need to have some parameters in place to ensure respect and emotional safety. What if you can't sit down over a Coke and have this conversation with your adult child, either because they live too far away or you're not really on talking terms? What's another way that you can build a plan to restore communication?
And sometimes you can't have that conversation because it's just too enmeshed. Sometimes it doesn't matter. Like, so I mentioned as a mediator, I would be in a room sometimes with individuals, whether it be a husband and wife or whatever the case may be. It was so bad that they would get triggered so fast. It was just constant. And there's some of you that have that kind of a strain. Then I would recommend that you meet with a counselor or a mediator to mediate how you can talk about stuff, not about your ongoing issues just yet, just how you can talk about it.
Yeah.
Have someone there with you to facilitate that so there's an agreement. Because it's interesting how we all tend to behave a little better when someone else is there with us than we do with each other. And it provides safety, it provides process, it provides something that where you can really both be heard without this muddy stuff that happens. So you just have to know where you're at in your relationship. Some of you can have that conversation one-on-one and you can set up that plan and you can break that cycle quickly. Some of you, it's been a lot. And guess what? Not just for them, but it doesn't feel safe for you either as a mom. Because I'll tell you something, when you've given your life for your kids and they start to attack you and tell you everything you did wrong, and then you're trying your best to manage your composure, you're trying your best to listen to them, and they're throwing arrows at your heart, that's not easy, okay? And that's very painful, and that might not be safe for you. I mean, some mothers will they'll go into a very deep state of despair and depression even for a long time after conversations because it's so volatile.
Yeah, that's a common experience for estranged moms.
So
Yeah.
I would say if it's like that, not just so that your child can be heard, so you behave yourself, but having someone there for you because they might behave themselves better too, right? And so just being kind to you and your adult child or your prodigal.
Mm-hmm. I really like that idea of seeking out a mediator just to help you set up communication guidelines, without going into all of the relationship issues. Because first you have to be able to communicate respectfully before you can get to all of that other stuff. And a mediator can help you come out of that process with a clear, simple plan that you've both agreed to follow. Um, that creates a much stronger likelihood for productive conversation moving forward, right? I want to talk to you about two specific groups of these moms who are probably listening. Let's take the first group first. So, as I mentioned before, some of these moms have some level of contact with their children, but they have no idea why their child is really distant emotionally. So, when a parent is in that situation and they have no idea why their child is really distant emotionally, maybe there hasn't been a big argument, the child has just drifted into relative silence or just great distance. How can that mom explore what her adult child needs or wants from the relationship?
Yeah, again, really difficult because we don't know what's caused them to just pull away, right?
Right.
So are we talking about where you actually have some contact, they've just become distant, you're actually connected to them somehow?
Right. So maybe you rarely hear from them. Maybe you hear from them, a few times a year or something, and they seem really distant emotionally when you do talk with them, but they haven't said, I'm upset about this or that. They just seem really distant emotionally. What can
Okay.
a mom do to kind of reach out without applying a lot of pressure?
Okay. Yeah, I got to think about that, how they can actually reach out, because I'm thinking more about when we're actually in conversations with them. And usually when people come to me, it's about they're actually talking, but they're fighting.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to teach them how to play in the sandbox nicely together and to create a shared understanding. So you probably are a little bit more of an expert on how do I reach out, if they've been estranged. But let's just imagine that you are trying to rebuild, okay? And they still are
Right.
not talking, okay? We call it the silent treatment, right? So when someone isn't talking much, all we have to go on is what we're seeing with our eyes, right? Right. We're seeing them maybe be in the room, but they're silent and they're looking down all the time. They've got their arms crossed, you know, they're speaking to us. And by the way, communication, 55% of messages when we're talking comes from our body language. Okay.
Right.
30% of what we say is done with our tone of voice, and only 7% is done with the actual words. So they're talking to you. They're just not talking to you with words. Okay. They're talking to you with nonverbals. So if there's a silent treatment, often if you want to get them to open up, one technique would be just to use descriptive language. Like just simply saying, you know, like I've noticed something's changed. Like in the past, we'd be talking about something's changed because I've noticed that you seem to be really quiet. What's changed for you? That's all you have to say. Don't say, why don't you want to talk to me? And I'll tell you about that in a second here. Why don't you want to talk to me? Why are you not talking to me? Just say, I've noticed that, you're not talking like you used to.
Right. Or you could say, I've noticed we haven't talked in a while. I wanted to reach out and make sure everything's okay. And
Right.
yeah.
Another thing you could say, I've noticed you haven't reached out for a while. What would make it easier for us to connect?
Yeah.
What we want to do is we want to start to use some good questions to encourage them. So identifying what you see with your eyes, you're not judging, you're just saying, you're describing what you've noticed, and then you're inviting them to clarify, but you want to do it in such a way that they don't feel interrogated, okay? Because when we ask questions, again, a lot of people ask, close-ended questions like, are you sick? Have you forgotten about us? Are you too busy for your mother? I mean, I don't know what mothers might actually say, but you can be interrogating them. And sometimes when we start a conversation, we go into the conversation almost like a checklist. Because again, we've already formed stories. We're already thinking why they have not done what they've done. And we're just kind of asking questions. Is it this? Is it this? Is it this? And guaranteed they're feeling interrogated and they're going to back off worse, right? So instead, we want to learn how to ask good questions, right? And, did you know that neuroscience and communication research has actually talked about how the way you frame a question will impact the other person's brain differently than using it other ways? And I'll tell you about that. So, for example, if you use the words what and that in your question, it tends to move the other person's brain to more exploring and problem solving.
Yes.
If you use the question why, it tends to move the person into defensiveness. Okay, they'll start to feel condemned or that. So when you say, why did you do that? Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why have you not called? Why are you not talking to me, right? Instead, you might want to try, what was happening for you that led you to that action? Or what's kept you from communicating?
Right.
Or what would make it easier for us to talk? Right?
That is definitely better because it keeps the other person from feeling attacked or like they need to be on the defensive.
Right. And it also they'll be kind of surprised because again, when you describe, I've noticed you're not talking, you're sitting down, you're kind of quiet. That's not how things used to be. They'll all of a sudden, oh, I am behaving different. They can't argue with that, right? So what would make it easier for you? Or what's kept you from talking? That's all. And they might say nothing.
Yeah.
You might say, okay, it's different though, isn't it? Yeah. Okay.
In that situation, they at least know that it's on your mind and that it matters to you, which could be a stepping stone to further conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So again, most of the things I'm talking about take a little bit of practice, like learning how to ask good questions, because we tend to just ask close-ended questions and interrogate them. Because you have to remember, what happens in the conversation, we tend to make it all about us. Like, why didn't they phone me back? What I think about their life, my opinion about this, it's about us. But really listening with the intent to hear and understand will bring a shared understanding. It will build trust with them. It will help to diffuse their emotion because you're telling them that you've been heard. It will help you to explore what's important to them because if they open up, you might hear something that you didn't know about them before, right? It might help to clarify what issues were really causing conflict with you and that person, right? Just by actually doing that. But you have to abandon, your need for you to clarify your stuff and just put on your curious hat for a minute and explore with them. You actually love them. You try to hear them and you try to build relationship with them, right? With your adult children or prodigals, what I would say is there's a part of their heart that isn't believing. There's a part of their heart, and God doesn't force us. He doesn't force us to believe. He doesn't force us to go along with things. So if you can see that in your child and say, I want to get to know them and love them as they are, even if I don't agree, I want to send them a message that they've been heard and understood, right? And if you can do that, practice questions, it's an art a little bit, right? Not everybody knows how to do that. Practice breathing when you get triggered. Practice those things in advance then when you come together, there's a higher probability you're going to have more wins than losses. And you're going to rebuild trust. And that'll move you to the next level.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that reminds me of, how important it is to listen. Why is it so hard for us to listen?
Why is it so hard for us to listen? Because I think what goes on is our brain right away picks up on what we should say next. And I think for a mom, again, it's because you have so much that you expect and you want for your kid, et cetera. And you sometimes put yourself in that position. But I'll tell you, when you go into a conversation with your opinions in advance and you wanting to tell them something and you wanting to solve it right away and you wanting to do this, it's all about you. It's what you think. Even when you say, I know how you feel, then you're starting to direct the conversation about you. Right now, they don't want to hear about you. So
they just want to be heard and understood.
Heard and understood. And you know what? It's so liberating when you don't have to solve a problem. You can just take that off your shoulders. I often say to people, like, when somebody's, if you go like this to a mirror, the mirror's going to go like this back to you. It's not going to go like this back to you. It's not going to add anything. So learning how to mirror what they tell you, don't add your stuff into it. Just try for a minute to say, how good does it feel to be heard and understood? I want to build a shared understanding. It's so much easier than trying to figure things out and fix everything. You're going to actually enjoy it. You might make discoveries. Why it's difficult, there's a lot of variables. I don't think we have time all through today to get into all the things that interrupt our ability to hear and listen. But some things we did talk about, like expectations, assumptions, going in with closed-ended questions just to check off your checklist, coming in as the mom with a different set of rules. All of those things contribute to us not listening.
Well, I want to talk before we close about the second group of moms that I brought up earlier. And some of the moms who will be listening to this episode don't have any contact with their adult children. They're completely blocked for whatever reason. And many of them hope for reconciliation in the future. They don't know if that will come. But in those cases, the thought of reopening communication can feel pretty scary. When it comes to, the communication tools that we've talked about, what could those moms do now, even though they don't have any contact with their children? What could they do now to be prepared for when they might have a future conversation with their children, or even in other conversations in which the stakes feel really high?
Yeah. Well, okay, I will go back to this. What I often say to people is you probably want to learn some basic communication skills when you're not in conflict. Okay. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like the game of hockey. My dad played really high level hockey. My son was drafted. It was a big deal. And my father used to say to him, you got to learn how to skate first. Everything else comes second, because when you're in that game and it's moving fast and everything's happening at one time, you don't have time to think. You've got to learn how to do some of this stuff a little more automatically. So preparing by understanding triggers, preparing by breathing, practice, like in a conversation with people you do have, and they tell you, that person was just, being very rude, and you can hear their anger. Try just reflecting an emotion just in that conversation. Boy, that made you angry. Try to see if you can hear and understand with everyday conversations with people that when you're not in conflict. Practice then, so that when you come with your child and that opportunity is restored, because God is our Redeemer, right? And He's the one that restores all things, and He makes a way where there is no way. But you're doing your part, right? Work on your journaling, work on your triggers, work on understanding, all of that kind of stuff. I would again recommend that if the time does come and you're not sure, I think if it's been extreme estrangement, I probably would recommend a mediator. And that's different than a counselor, okay? So counselors get into why we do what we do, and it's in the weeds, and it's therapy. Mediation isn't therapy. It's very clean. It's very nice. We don't get into that. What you're doing is you're basically, a mediator is taking information from one party, cleaning it off, so the person can hear and understand what they said. Then the other person gets to talk. And when you're done, the mediator helps you to come up with a plan. It's very clean. It's not messy. It's very, very safely facilitated. It can clean up expectations. It can clarify assumptions. It can actually tackle, different issues that need to be solved, that can be solved. All of those things come into play. So I think if there was extreme estrangement and your child was willing to actually sit down with you, I probably would recommend a mediator. I don't think I would try and go in on alone initially, because I think there's so much water under the bridge. And if you can get a win in one conversation with your child where it's done really in a healthy way, I guarantee you it's going to be a door that's going to open for a whole lot more wins. Okay. So I think that's probably what I would recommend.
Right. Start with the mediator. But in the meantime, now go ahead and start practicing all of these communication tools in other conversations with other people, just as you go about in your daily life, so that when that opportunity comes later and after you've met with a mediator and set up your communication guidelines, that these communication techniques come naturally to you.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And I will say something too, is that when you start learning communication skills, somebody might just say, what'd you do? Take a course? Because you might sound wooden, because it just feels weird. If you're not used to it, you might feel like it's so formal. You can say, actually, I'm really trying to work on it. Would you work with me here? Right? Yeah. I'm really doing my best. Even if you have a conversation with someone where you're used to having conflict with them and they say, what'd you do? Take a course, or don't pull that psychobabble on me, right? Because they feel like you're getting you're above them. Say, no, actually, what we did before wasn't working. I'm trying this out. I'm not really good at it yet, but I really want to, because I think it might help us, right? So don't be intimidated by people if they try to shut you down because they think you should naturally know how to do this stuff. A doctor or a surgeon had to learn how to practice before they could do what was good, right? So you've got to practice skills so that they become more automatic and easier to do.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Well, before we close this episode, Michelle, what parting words do you have for our listeners?
Well, I think I would have to say to all you moms out there, first of all, that, God sees you, He loves you, and He's so aware of what's taking place. He knows how your heart is broken. As the Father in heaven, He talks about, like we talk about worshiping God. He says, if you have a gift you're worshiping God, leave your gift at the altar and be reconciled. He's so big on reconciliation, and He knows all the water under the bridge. And you're in really good hands with Sarah. She's teaching you how to pray, because prayer is really powerful. Learning how to hear from God, to pray as it is in heaven into the situation. He's all about reconciliation. You don't know what He's doing behind the scenes with your kids. You don't know how He's preparing the way for you to have those conversations that are going to be effective. And He wants to heal your heart. He wants to heal your child's heart. He's for family, and He's for you. And so there is hope. I know it's painful, but I want to say there is hope. And I just really believe that God's going to make a way for you.
Yes, absolutely. God is all about restoration. Well, Thank you so much, Michelle, for being on the show today. And I know that my audience is just going to really appreciate everything we've talked about today.
Oh, it was great. I'm so glad that I could be a part of it. And I love your topic. It's a very real subject right now that's happening for lots and lots of families. And I'm glad that we're talking about it. Thanks for having me.
Hey, friends, if you'd like to connect with Michelle for her mediation services, I will put a link in the episode show notes. Hey, I hope today's episode inspired you. If so, would you click the follow button for the show and share it with someone who wants to learn more about trusting God? Also, please take 30 seconds to leave me a quick review of the show on Apple Podcasts. It means so much to me to know this podcast is encouraging you. Set your alarm to wake up to Jesus in your mocha and meet me here every Tuesday for a new episode. See you soon.